Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cheddar, brought to you by HP with Brad Smith. I'm Baker Bachetta. We're following the breaking news right here at the moment. Former campaign chairman for President Trump, Paul Manafort, is suing the Department of Justice, alleging that it is a broad authority by special counsel Robert Mueller, alleging that the Justice Department violated the law in appointing the special counsel Mueller to oversee the Russia investigation. Joining us now to react to that news and all the other stuff happening out of Washington is Representative Steve Cohen, Democrat from Tennessee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure. We've given you a copy of the lawsuit. I want to get your initial reaction to the breaking news right now about Paul Manafort.
Well, my initial reaction is it looks like it's a 17-page lawsuit, and you gave it to me a minute and a half ago. And I was a pretty good lawyer, but I'm not that good a reader or that good a lawyer to give you a real in-depth analysis. But most of what I think they're suggesting probably should come in the form of responses to the indictment. And to file an independent lawsuit, I think, is rather novel and rather unique. They are in the district court in D.C., which would be the appropriate venue if it be accepted as having jurisdiction. But I think it's an unusual attack, and I think it probably shows Manafort knows the facts are against him. He's probably guilty, so he's trying to find a unique way to attack it on procedural grounds, because on substantive grounds, he's laundered money probably.
And just to that note, we know Paul Manafort pled guilty to multiple counts back in October, including conspiracy against the U.S. and money laundering and related to the Russia probe that's been going on. Do you think, though, Congressman, that the Russia investigation is too broad? Does Paul Manafort have a point there?
No, I don't think it's too broad. I think that the Attorney General gave Mr. Mueller authorities to look into all those facts relating to the Russia and hacking and involvement in our election and anything that grew out of it. And I think there's a lot that grows out of it, and a lot of it has to do, as Steve Bannon said today, apparently, or said in the Michael Wolff book, that a lot of it has to do with money laundering, and it deals a lot with Donald Trump Jr. and with Javanka and that whole crowd. And I think we're going to find out that this is one of the most awful and disgusting periods in the history of American government and politics, and how the Trump team used a no bars hold, anything that we can use to get elected approach, and they got elected using the resources of the Russian government, and now they've tried to keep it away from the American people and tried to stop people like James Comey and Robert Mueller from investigating and bringing out the truth to the American people.
Do you think there is any part of this, knowing that this lawsuit has come through and the investigation has overreached its bounds at some points perhaps, and that is argued in this lawsuit particularly, are there any parts of the investigation that could hold up still as a result, should they find anything that does deem, perhaps President himself, perhaps somebody from his family, perhaps anybody that's in the inner workings of that inner group, find them guilty at the end of the day?
Well, I don't know if the lawsuit's going to have any effect, and I think, when you're a defendant and you're looking at a lot of time, you're going to do anything you can to throw the kitchen sink in. And that's what Manafort and his lawyers did.
All right, Congressman, we're going to switch gears and talk about the meeting that's happening right now as we speak. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, they are meeting right now on Capitol Hill in Paul Ryan's office, meeting with the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House, going over the budget, talking about DACA. What do you hope comes from this meeting, and do you think that Democrats can strike a deal with Republicans to keep the government funded while also getting an extension for Dreamers? And as President Trump says, he wants money for the wall.
Well, I think Leader Pelosi and Leader Schumer will work to see that we do keep the government open, but they won't capitulate. The Republicans control both the House and the Senate, as well as having the White House and a majority in the Supreme Court. The issues here are the House and Senate. They've got the majorities. They should be able to put together a budget. If they can't, and they need to come to the Democrats to get help, they're going to have to give the Democrats some things, and part of that is giving the DACA kids some freedom, funding the Children's Health Plan, and not taking money from children to fund it, helping with community health centers. And while we are supportive of some additional funding for defense, which the Republicans are in favor of much more defense spending than I am, and maybe some of the Democrats, there certainly needs to be a corresponding increase in domestic spending, because a lot of people in America are having difficulties and need to have programs that have been reduced or in jeopardy funded. So we're trying to see that not only our defense, if the Republicans get defense spending, there's going to have to be non-defense spending here in America that helps our folks out living in difficult conditions.
Congressman Cohen, just to follow up on that, are Democrats planning to shut the government down if it does not include DACA funding?
The Democrats can't shut the government down. The Republicans have got a majority. When you've got a majority in the House and the Senate, it's up to you to come up with a budget. If they have a problem because they don't present something that can get the number of votes needed in the Senate to pass, or they can't bring the Freedom Party on in the House, that's a Republican problem. The Democrats will not be shutting the government down. The Republicans may shut it down by being recalcitrant and unreasonable, but that's the issue they may find themselves in, and they're not really sitting in the catbird seat.
I want to jump back to an interview that you had on Sunday with MSNBC, where you actually called President Trump a quote, or the quote, most despicable human being ever to serve as president. Tough words and rhetoric on Capitol Hill and Twitter. So how do you put feelings aside, knowing that some of these resolutions need to be worked towards right now?
You mean the resolutions of government?
Yes.
Government issues? Well, it doesn't affect how I vote on government issues. I was one of the minority of Democrats who voted to make General Mattis, make him eligible to be Secretary of Defense when he only had 4 years separation from the service rather than the 7. I think that there's certain areas where that area I supported the administration, but there's so many places where you can't support them philosophically. The tax bill that they just passed is going to help 80% of the money is going to go to the top 1% in society. And people, the middle class, were lied to. There was a con job telling them it was a middle class tax cut. The middle class will see a little bit of improvement in their paychecks soon, but that won't last. Those cuts were temporary. The ones for corporate America were permanent, and the ones for corporate America and for the upper 1%, where the top rates reduced from 39.2 to 37%, that's going to give them tens and hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars in tax relief. And then the cut in the inheritance tax, where instead of $11 million cap, it's a $22 million cap before you start getting taxed. That's $11 million, or $4.5 million, 4.75, I guess, or $4.8 million in tax relief given to people who are members of the Lucky Sperm Club.
Congressman, I want to talk about President Trump's tweet yesterday in regards to North Korea. The president says that he has a bigger and more effective button than the president over in North Korea. Chris Murphy, a senator and Democratic senator, is trying to find a way that Congress essentially could basically make it harder for President Trump to go to war with somebody like North Korea. Do you support legislation that Congress needs to be involved in making sure that if we go to war with North Korea, you guys have a seat at the table? And then what was your reaction to President Trump's tweets last night?
Well, I know Ed Markey and Ted Lieu have a bill which I support, and I would support any action that would prevent the president from making a first strike without Congress's approval. It's basically going to war, and a war that would end many lives, American lives, as well as others. So I think that's important, and particularly with this president. You know, you see what's come out with he and Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon quoted Trump's friend Barack, or Barrack, whatever his name is, but it's his billionaire buddy, who said he's not only stupid, but he's crazy. You know, the Secretary of State said he was a moron. I think being the most reprehensible person at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is rather in line with Secretary Tillerson's comments and Mr. Barack's comments, who are friends of the president. And I'm sure Steve Bannon will have some prime statements as well, particularly after the president claimed he had nothing to do with the election and was all kind of terrible things. The president's picked a bad enemy, and he certainly doesn't have a whole lot of loyalty to his friends. He demands a lot of loyalty to him, but he doesn't give it, apparently, especially with Steve Bannon, who I think was the brains behind that campaign. And Breitbart's so important for this administration and for this president, and for Breitbart to turn on him, because, and they may very well, his comments about Donald Jr. and Jared, that they were sitting on a beach looking at a Category 5, and that they were, like, in essence, the Confederacy of dunces. It's almost like Jonathan Swift has seen what's going on here, and the great person who will be known by the surrounding themselves with a bunch of dunces looking in from the outside may be Robert Mueller. And it could be that John Kennedy Tools may be acting here today.
I'm glad you mentioned Steve Bannon. We have less than 30 seconds, Congressman, but I want to get your take on President Trump's comments about Steve Bannon. Do you agree with the president that Steve Bannon has lost his mind?
No, I don't. I think Steve Bannon's very clever. He's very smart. I don't agree with a lot of what he says in his political positions, but there's no question he's smart as hell, and there's no question that he knows what he's doing, and he is clever, and I don't think anybody would say that he was stupid and dumb.
All right, that's Representative Steve Cohen from one of my favorite states, Tennessee. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. I hope Memphis is one of your favorite cities. We
That
have lots
is.
of cheddar
Memphis,
cheese here.
Yes, Memphis is one of my faves. Love the barbecue there. Thank you, Congressman.